The key was still warm in my trembling hand when I heard the voices from inside Tommy's house. I stood there on his front porch like a fool, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might give out right then and there. 47 years of marriage, and I'd never once doubted Martha. Not once. But here was her car in my son-in-law's driveway when she was supposed to be across town with her sister. The voices got clearer as I stepped closer to the door. Martha's laugh, that sweet, musical sound I'd fallen in love with all those years ago at the county fair. And Tommy's deeper voice, saying something I couldn't quite make out. They sounded happy. Comfortable. Like they'd done this before. My mind started racing faster than a greyhound at the track. How long had this been going on? How many times had Martha lied about where she was going? How many afternoons at Dolores' house had really been spent here? I thought about turning around, getting back in my truck, and pretending I'd never seen anything. But my feet wouldn't move. 47 years of trust was crumbling beneath me like old concrete, and I needed to know the truth. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped. What if I was wrong? What if there was some perfectly innocent explanation? Maybe Dolores was here too. Maybe they were planning some kind of surprise for me. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew better. A man doesn't live this long without learning to trust his gut, and my gut was telling me something was very, very wrong. The laughter stopped suddenly, replaced by voices too low for me to hear. I pressed my ear closer to the door, feeling like a common sneak but unable to stop myself. "We can't keep doing this," I heard Martha say, her voice strained. "I know," Tommy replied, and there was something in his tone that made my blood run cold. "But I can't help myself. When I'm with you." That was all I needed to hear. The world tilted sideways, and I grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. My Martha. My sweet, devoted Martha. And Tommy, the boy I'd welcomed into our family like my own son. I don't remember walking back to my truck. One minute I was standing on that porch with my world falling apart, and the next I was sitting behind the wheel, staring at those two cars in the driveway like they were evidence in a murder trial. Which, in a way, they were. The murder of everything I'd believed about my life. I started the engine and drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Every turn, every familiar landmark looked different now, like I was seeing my whole town through a stranger's eyes. The old oak tree where I'd proposed to Martha 50 years ago. The church where we'd been married. The elementary school where we'd watched our 3 daughters perform in Christmas plays. All of it felt like lies now. At home, I sat in my recliner and stared at the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. The house felt different too, all those pictures of our family, all those memories we'd built together. Were any of them real? Martha came home at 5:30, just like always. I heard her humming in the kitchen as she started dinner, the same song she'd been humming for 20 years. She called out to me like she did every evening. "Harold. How was your day, honey?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't even look at her when she appeared in the doorway of the living room, still wearing that blue dress I'd always said brought out her eyes. "Harold. Are you feeling all right? You look pale." She came over and put her hand on my forehead, checking for fever like she had 1,000 times over the years. Her touch, once so comforting, now felt like a brand on my skin. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. "Well, dinner's almost ready. Pot roast, just the way you like it." She kissed the top of my head and went back to the kitchen, and I sat there wondering how she could act so normal. How she could touch me and kiss me and make my favorite dinner when she'd been with him just hours before. Dinner was torture. Martha chattered about her day, lies, all lies, while I pushed food around my plate and tried not to look at her. She talked about Dolores and the wedding plans, spinning her story with such ease it was like she'd been practicing. "You're quiet tonight," she said finally, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Are you sure you're feeling well?" I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for nearly half a century. The mother of my children. The person I'd trusted more than anyone else in the world. Her face was the same, but everything else had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed, and I'd just been blind all along. Just tired, I said. That night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many other nights she'd lain there thinking about him. Wondering how long I'd been living a lie. 3 days passed. 3 days of watching her, listening to her stories, pretending everything was normal while my heart slowly broke into a million pieces. She went out twice more, once to the grocery store, once to visit her friend Eleanor, and each time I wondered if she was really going where she said she was. On Saturday morning, she announced she was going to help Dolores again. More wedding planning, she said brightly, grabbing her purse and keys. I'll probably be gone most of the afternoon. After her car disappeared down the street, I sat for exactly 10 minutes. Then I got in my truck and drove to Tommy's house. Sure enough, there was the powder blue Buick. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked right up to the front door and knocked, loud and firm. The voices inside stopped immediately. I heard footsteps, then the sound of the deadbolt turning. Tommy opened the door, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Guilt and fear and something else, resignation, maybe. Like he'd been expecting this moment. "Harold," he said quietly. "Where is she?" My voice was steadier than I felt. He stepped aside without a word, and I walked into his living room. Martha was there, sitting on his couch with her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl caught cheating on a test. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Harold," she whispered. "I can explain." "Can you?" I asked. "Can you really explain why you've been lying to me? Why you've been sneaking around behind my back?" "It's not what you think," she said, but her voice was weak, unconvincing. "Then tell me what it is." Tommy cleared his throat. "Maybe I should leave you two to talk." "No," I said, not taking my eyes off Martha. "You're part of this. You stay right here." The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Outside, a dog was barking. A lawn mower started up somewhere down the street. Normal Saturday sounds in a world that no longer felt normal. Finally, Martha spoke. "I've been coming here to help Tommy," she said. "But not the way you're thinking." "Then what way?" She looked at Tommy, and he nodded slightly. "He's been sick, Harold. Really sick. And he didn't want anyone to know." I stared at her, waiting for more, but she just sat there with tears rolling down her cheeks. Tommy was looking at the floor like it held all the answers to life's mysteries. "Sick how?" I asked finally. Martha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Cancer, Harold. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors, they don't think he has much time left." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Tommy. My strong, hard-working son-in-law who could lift a 2x4 with one hand and work a 14-hour day without breaking a sweat. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was looking at him with new eyes. He did look thinner than the last time I'd really paid attention. His face was paler, and there were dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed before. "I'm sorry, Harold," Tommy said quietly. "I didn't want anyone to know. Especially not Sarah. Not yet. Sarah doesn't know." My voice cracked on my daughter's name. "You haven't told your own wife?" "I can't." Tommy's voice broke. "She's been so happy lately, talking about maybe trying for another baby, planning that vacation to Colorado next summer. How do I tell her that that we might not have?" He couldn't finish the sentence, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. My anger was melting away, replaced by something much worse, the terrible understanding of what this meant. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 months, Martha answered for him. He came to me first because he was scared. He didn't know how to tell Sarah, and he needed someone to talk to. Someone to help him figure out what to do. Why Martha? Why not me? Tommy looked up then, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Because you're Sarah's father. I was afraid you'd make me tell her right away, and I'm not ready for that yet. Martha, she understood. She's been helping me research treatment options, going to doctor appointments with me when Sarah thinks I'm working late. I sank into Tommy's armchair, feeling every one of my 73 years. Jesus, Tommy. How bad is it? Bad, he said simply. The oncologist thinks maybe 6 months, possibly less. I've been doing chemotherapy, but it's not working the way they hoped. 6 months. My little girl's husband had 6 months to live, and she didn't even know he was sick. You have to tell her, I said. I know, Tommy whispered. I need a little more time. I want to get my affairs in order first. Make sure she'll be taken care of financially. Figure out how to explain it to the kids. The kids. My grandbabies, little Emma who was only 5, and Michael who just turned 8. How do you tell children that age that their daddy is dying? Martha, I said, turning to my wife. Why didn't you tell me? She was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. He made me promise not to tell anyone. And I thought maybe if I could help him find the right doctors, the right treatment, maybe we could fix this before anyone else had to know. I understood then why she'd been lying about where she was going. It wasn't betrayal, it was love. Love for Tommy, love for Sarah, love for our whole family. She'd been carrying this terrible secret all by herself, trying to protect everyone. I'm sorry, I said to both of them. I'm sorry I thought. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. Martha came over to me then, and I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight while she cried against my shoulder. Over her head, I looked at Tommy, this young man I'd watched marry my daughter, who'd given me 2 beautiful grandchildren, who'd always treated me with respect and kindness. What can I do? I asked him. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, Harold. I honest to God don't know. But something was still bothering me. Something didn't add up right, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Maybe it was the way Martha had been acting lately, not just the lying about where she was going, but other things. The way she'd been humming more than usual, seeming almost happy. How do you act happy when you're carrying around news like this? Over the next few days, I watched my wife more carefully than I had in years. I told myself I was just being supportive, trying to understand what she was going through. But the truth was, something still felt off to me. On Tuesday, she said she was going to the grocery store. Nothing unusual about that, Martha went grocery shopping every Tuesday like clockwork. But when she came home 2 hours later with only a small bag of items, I started wondering again. Busy at the store today? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Oh, you know how it is, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Caught up talking with Eleanor at the checkout. You know how she likes to chat. Eleanor worked at the bank, not the grocery store. I'd known Eleanor for 20 years, she'd never worked at Peterson's Market a day in her life. That night, I lay in bed listening to Martha's breathing and trying to make sense of things. Tommy was sick, that much I believed. I'd seen it in his eyes, heard it in his voice. But there was something else going on, something Martha wasn't telling me. On Wednesday, I decided to do something I'd never done in 47 years of marriage. I was going to follow my wife. She left the house at 1:30, saying she was going to help Dolores with more wedding preparations. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then got in my truck and followed her powder blue Buick from a distance. She didn't go to Dolores' house. She drove straight to Tommy's. My heart started that terrible pounding again as I parked around the corner, just like I had that first day. This time, I was more careful about approaching the house. I kept low, moving from tree to tree like some kind of old fool playing soldier. When I got to the side window, I could hear voices inside, but they were too muffled to make out clearly. I crept around to the back of the house, where Tommy had a small window over his kitchen sink. The curtain was thin there, and I could see inside better. What I saw made my blood run cold. Martha was standing at Tommy's stove, stirring something in a pot. She was wearing an apron, not one of her own, but one that must have belonged to Tommy's first wife before she passed. Tommy was sitting at his kitchen table, and they were talking and laughing like they were comfortable. Too comfortable. But that wasn't what froze me to the spot. It was the way Martha touched his shoulder as she passed behind his chair. It was casual, intimate, the kind of touch you give someone you've touched 1,000 times before. The kind of touch a wife gives her husband. I pressed closer to the window, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. Martha set a bowl in front of Tommy, soup, it looked like, and then she did something that made my world tilt sideways again. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. It was a quick kiss, nothing dramatic, but it was the kind of kiss Martha gave me when she brought me coffee in the morning. Familiar. Loving. Natural. Tommy looked up at her and smiled, and she smoothed his hair down where she'd mussed it with her kiss. They exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets, shared intimacy, shared everything. I stumbled backward from the window, my legs suddenly weak. What the hell was going on? Was Tommy really sick, or was that just another lie? And if he was sick, what did that have to do with the way my wife was touching him, kissing him, taking care of him like he was her husband instead of mine? I made it back to my truck somehow and sat there for a long time, trying to think straight. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe Martha was just being motherly, after all, Tommy's own mother had died when he was young. Maybe she was taking care of him because Sarah couldn't, because no one else knew he was sick. But that kiss. That look. The easy way they moved around each other in that kitchen. I drove home and waited for Martha to come back. When she walked through the door at 4:30, she was humming again. How was Dolores? I asked. Oh, fine. We got a lot accomplished today. The flowers are all ordered, and we picked out the centerpieces. She was hanging up her coat, not looking at me as she talked. That's nice. What kind of flowers? Martha paused, her hand still on her coat. What? What kind of flowers did you order? Oh, roses. Pink roses. Very pretty. But Dolores' granddaughter was getting married in November. I remembered Sarah mentioning it weeks ago, a fall wedding with autumn colors. Orange and gold and deep red. Pink roses wouldn't fit that theme at all. Another lie. Even about the damn flowers. That night at dinner, I studied my wife's face as she talked about her day. She looked. I don't know how to describe it. She looked like a woman with a secret. Not necessarily a guilty secret, but definitely something she was keeping to herself. There was a lightness about her, a kind of energy I hadn't seen in years. You seem happy lately, I said. Martha looked up from her meatloaf, surprised. Do I? Yes. Happier than you've been in a long time. She smiled then, and it was a real smile, not one of those polite ones she gave the church ladies. I suppose I am. It feels good to be needed, you know. To feel like I'm making a difference in someone's life. Making a difference how? Oh, just, helping people. Being there when they need someone. More vague answers. More half-truths. After dinner, Martha went to take a bath, and I found myself going through her purse, something I'd never done in all our years together. I felt like a criminal, but I couldn't stop myself. In her wallet, tucked behind her driver's license, I found a folded piece of paper. It was a doctor's appointment card, but not for Tommy. It was for Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a name I didn't recognize. The appointment was scheduled for next Friday at 2 o'clock. The address was for a medical building clear across town, not anywhere near our regular doctors. I put the card back exactly where I'd found it, my hands shaking. What kind of doctor was Martha seeing that she didn't want me to know about? And why was she seeing a doctor at all? She'd always told me about her medical appointments before. Too many secrets. Too many lies. Too many things that didn't add up. I went to bed that night more confused than ever. Tommy was sick, I believed that much. But there was something else going on, something bigger, and I was starting to think that Martha's involvement with Tommy went deeper than just helping a sick son-in-law. The next morning, Martha announced she was going shopping for a new dress. What for? I asked. Oh, just because. A woman needs a new dress now and then. She was humming as she left the house, and I made a decision. I was going to follow her again. And this time, I wasn't going to stop at just watching through windows. This time, I was going to find out exactly what my wife was hiding from me. I waited until her Buick disappeared around the corner, then grabbed my keys and followed the same route I'd taken before. Sure enough, she was heading toward Tommy's neighborhood again. But this time, instead of going straight to his house, she made a stop at Hartwell's pharmacy. I parked across the street and watched through the big front windows as Martha talked to the pharmacist. She handed him a prescription, waited while he filled it, then paid and left with a small white bag. The whole transaction took maybe 10 minutes, but something about the way she held that bag, carefully, protectively, made my stomach clench. From the pharmacy, she drove straight to Tommy's house. I parked in my usual spot around the corner and made my way to the back of the house, my old knees protesting with every step. The November air was getting colder, and I pulled my jacket tighter as I crept toward the kitchen window. I could see Martha inside, sitting at Tommy's kitchen table with that white pharmacy bag in front of her. She was staring at it like it contained poison instead of medicine. Tommy was across from her, his hands folded on the table, and for the first time since I'd learned he was sick, I really looked at him. He was thin, too thin. His clothes hung loose on his frame, and his skin had a gray pallor that spoke of serious illness. But there was something else about his posture, the way he was looking at Martha with such gentle concern, that made me realize I'd been wrong about everything. I pressed closer to the window, straining to hear what they were saying. "You have to take them, Martha," Tommy was saying, his voice soft but firm. "The doctor said they'll help with the nausea." "I know," Martha replied, but she didn't reach for the bag. "It's just, taking the pills makes it real, you know. As long as I don't take them, I can pretend this isn't happening." Tommy reached across the table and covered her hands with his. "It's going to be okay. We'll get through this together, just like we planned." "But what about Harold? What about the girls? I can't put them through this, Tommy. I can't watch them watch me die." The words hit me like a physical blow. Watch her die. What was she talking about? Tommy squeezed her hands. "They love you, Martha. They deserve to know what's happening so they can be there for you. And Harold, he's stronger than you think he is." Martha shook her head, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "You didn't see him when his brother died last year. It nearly broke him. And with his heart condition getting worse. I can't do that to him. I can't be the reason he—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I understood what she was saying, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. "Martha," Tommy said gently, "keeping this secret is killing you faster than the cancer ever could." Cancer. The word hung in the air between them like a death sentence, and suddenly everything made sense. The doctor's appointment card. The pharmacy visits. The way Martha had been acting, not guilty, but scared. Scared and trying to be brave at the same time. My wife had cancer, and she was trying to handle it alone. I slumped against the side of the house, my legs suddenly weak. How long had she known? How many sleepless nights had she spent lying next to me, carrying this terrible secret? How many times had I complained about some minor ache or pain while she was fighting for her life? The doctor said 6 months, maybe less, Martha was saying now, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought maybe I could. I thought I could spare everyone the pain. Handle the treatments on my own, and when the time came. That's not how this works, Tommy said firmly. You can't protect people from loving you, Martha. And you can't go through this alone. Through the window, I watched my wife of 47 years break down completely. Her shoulders shook with sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. Tommy got up from his chair and came around the table to put his arms around her, holding her like the daughter he'd never had. I'm so scared, Tommy, she whispered. I'm so scared, and I don't know what to do. I know, he said, stroking her gray hair. I know you are. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore. I couldn't watch any longer. I stumbled away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might actually give out this time. Everything I'd been thinking, all my suspicions and jealousy and hurt feelings, none of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was that Martha was sick, and she was trying to protect me from it. I made it back to my truck somehow and sat there for a long time, trying to process what I'd learned. Martha had cancer. Stage 4, she'd said. 6 months or less. While I'd been worrying about her having an affair, she'd been facing her own mortality. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. How selfish I'd been, how wrapped up in my own fears and insecurities. While Martha was fighting the battle of her life, I'd been playing detective, following her around, doubting her love for me. But underneath the guilt was something else, a fierce, protective anger. How dare she try to handle this alone? How dare she think I wasn't strong enough to face this with her? We'd promised each other, in sickness and in health, 47 years ago, and by God, I meant to keep that promise. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and plans and a terrible, crushing fear. When Martha came home an hour later, I was sitting in my recliner, pretending to read the newspaper. How was your shopping trip? I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. Oh, fine, she said, hanging up her coat. Didn't find anything I liked, though. Another lie, but this time I understood why she was lying. She was trying to protect me, just like she'd always protected our family from anything that might hurt us. That night at dinner, I studied her face in the lamplight. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see the signs I'd been missing. She was thinner than she'd been a few months ago. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. And when she thought I wasn't looking, her face would sometimes crumple with pain, not physical pain, I thought, but the emotional pain of carrying such a heavy burden alone. Martha, I said suddenly, setting down my fork. She looked up, startled. What is it, Harold? I love you. You know that, don't you? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might tell me everything right then and there. But instead, she just smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I love you too, Harold. More than you'll ever know. After dinner, she said she was tired and went to bed early. I stayed up, sitting in my chair and thinking about everything I'd learned. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, to tell her I knew about the cancer and demand that she let me help her fight it. But another part of me understood why she was keeping it secret. Martha had always been the strong one in our family. When the girls were little and one of them got hurt, they ran to Martha. When money was tight and we couldn't afford Christmas presents, Martha found a way to make Christmas magical anyway. When my father died and I couldn't stop crying, Martha held me together until I could stand on my own again. She'd spent her whole life taking care of everyone else. The idea of needing care herself, of being the one who was vulnerable and scared, must have been terrifying for her. But she wasn't going to face this alone. Not if I had anything to say about it. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to everything. I noticed that Martha was eating less, pushing food around her plate instead of finishing her meals. I noticed that she took longer getting ready in the mornings, moving more slowly, sitting down more often. I noticed that she'd started wearing long sleeves even when it was warm, and I wondered if she was trying to hide weight loss or maybe bruises from blood draws. On Thursday, I decided to test my theory. Martha said she was going to visit Eleanor, so I drove to Eleanor's house and waited. Sure enough, Martha never showed up. Instead, her car was parked outside the medical building where that doctor's appointment card had been from. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. I sat in my truck across the parking lot, watching the building's entrance. After about an hour, Martha came out, walking slowly and carefully. She looked exhausted, and she was carrying a small white bag, another prescription, I assumed. Instead of going home, she drove to Tommy's house again. This time, I didn't bother sneaking around to spy on them. I knew what they were talking about. Tommy was probably the only person Martha had told about her diagnosis, and he was helping her deal with it. No wonder she'd been spending so much time there. She needed someone to talk to, someone who could help her carry the weight of this secret. But why Tommy? Why not me, or one of our daughters, or her sister Dolores? The answer came to me as I sat there watching her car in Tommy's driveway. Tommy was sick too. He understood what she was going through in a way that healthy people couldn't. They were helping each other face their mortality, supporting each other through the darkest time of their lives. And here I'd been, jealous and suspicious, thinking the worst of both of them. When Martha came home that evening, she looked more tired than I'd ever seen her. She moved like every step hurt, and when she sat down at the dinner table, she winced slightly. Rough day? I asked. She forced a smile. Just tired. Eleanor and I did some cleaning at her house, and I'm not as young as I used to be. Another lie, but told with such love and concern for my feelings that it broke my heart. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. Martha was carrying this burden alone, trying to protect me from the truth, but in doing so, she was robbing us both of precious time. If she really only had 6 months left, I didn't want to waste a single day of it living a lie. Friday morning, after Martha left for what I now knew was probably another doctor's appointment, I drove to Tommy's house. I didn't sneak around this time. I walked right up to the front door and knocked. Tommy answered, looking surprised to see me. Harold? What are you doing here? I know, I said simply. About Martha. About the cancer. I know everything. The color drained from Tommy's face. How long have you known? A few days. I heard you two talking through the window. I felt ashamed admitting it, but there was no point in lying now. Tommy stepped aside to let me in. She's going to kill me. She made me promise not to tell anyone. She doesn't have to know you told me. But Tommy, I can't let her go through this alone. She's my wife. This is my fight too. Tommy sank into his chair, looking older than his 35 years. She's trying to protect you, Harold. She knows about your heart condition, and she's afraid that the stress of her illness will make it worse. My heart condition? I stared at him. What heart condition? Tommy looked confused. The one you had surgery for last year? Martha said the doctor told you to avoid stress, that another heart attack could. I didn't have heart surgery last year, I said slowly. I had my gallbladder removed. And I've never had a heart attack. We stared at each other in silence as the implications of this sank in. Tommy, I said carefully, what exactly has Martha told you about my health? His face went pale. She said you had serious heart problems. That the doctor said any major stress could kill you. That's why she didn't want to tell you about her cancer. There's nothing wrong with my heart, Tommy. I have high blood pressure, but that's it. Martha knows that. The silence stretched between us, heavy with understanding. Martha hadn't just been trying to protect me from the truth about her illness. She'd been lying to Tommy too, making up stories about my health to justify keeping her secret. Why would she lie about that? Tommy asked. I thought I knew, but the answer was too terrible to say out loud. Martha hadn't just been trying to protect me from her illness. She'd been trying to protect everyone from having to watch her die. She'd been planning to face her cancer completely alone, to spare all of us the pain of losing her slowly. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. If Martha was willing to lie about my health to justify keeping her secret, what else might she be lying about? Tommy, I said slowly, are you really sick? Do you really have cancer? The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. No, he whispered. No, I'm not sick. Martha asked me to, she needed someone to. To what, Tommy? He buried his face in his hands. She needed someone to practice with. Someone to help her figure out how to tell you and the girls about her diagnosis. She's been coming here to rehearse, I guess. She'd pretend I was you, or Sarah, or your other daughters, and she'd try to find the right words. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Practice? She's terrified of telling you, Harold. She's convinced that the shock will trigger another heart attack and kill you. Even though you keep telling me you don't have heart problems, she's somehow convinced herself that you do. I sank into Tommy's couch, trying to process this new information. Martha had been coming here to practice telling me she was dying. She'd been so afraid of my reaction that she'd created an elaborate charade, involving Tommy in her deception, all to find a way to break the news gently. How long has this been going on? I asked. 3 months, Tommy said. Ever since she got the diagnosis. She made me promise not to tell anyone, especially not Sarah. She said she needed time to figure out how to handle everything. 3 months. For 3 months, my wife had been carrying this terrible burden, trying to find the courage to tell me she was dying. But Tommy, why you? Why not talk to one of her friends, or her sister? Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm the only one who knows what it's like to lose someone to cancer. My first wife, before Sarah, she died of breast cancer when she was only 28. Martha thought I'd understand what she was going through better than anyone else. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Tommy's first wife had died young, and Martha had been there for him during that terrible time. Now she was facing the same disease, and she'd turned to the one person who truly understood her fear. What has she been telling you about me? I asked. About my supposed heart condition. She said you had surgery last year for blocked arteries. She said the doctor warned her that any major stress could cause another heart attack, and that she had to be very careful about how she broke news to you. Tommy, I had my gallbladder out last year. It was routine surgery. There's nothing wrong with my heart. Tommy stared at me, comprehension dawning on his face. Then why would she? Because she's scared, I said. She's so scared of leaving me that she's convinced herself I can't handle the truth. She's created this whole fiction about my health to justify keeping her secret. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us trying to understand the depth of Martha's deception. Not malicious deception, loving deception. She was lying to protect everyone she cared about, even if it meant facing her death completely alone. Harold, Tommy said finally, there's something else you should know. My stomach clenched. What? She's not just scared of telling you about the cancer. She's scared of telling you other things. Things she says she should have told you years ago. What kind of things? Tommy looked uncomfortable. Family things. Secrets she's been keeping since before I even met Sarah. Before I could ask what he meant, we heard a car door slam outside. Tommy went to the window and peered through the curtains. It's Martha, he said. She's back early. I should go, I said, starting to get up. No, Tommy said firmly. Stay. She needs to know that you know. She needs to stop carrying this alone. The front door opened, and Martha walked in carrying another small white pharmacy bag. She stopped short when she saw me sitting on Tommy's couch. Harold? Her voice was small, frightened. What are you doing here? I know, Martha, I said gently. I know about the cancer. The color drained completely from her face, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Tommy moved quickly to her side, guiding her to a chair. How long have you known? She whispered. A few days. I heard you talking through the window. Martha closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right way, the right time. Martha, look at me. I got up and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. There is no right way to tell someone you love that you're sick. There's just the truth, and we face it together. But your heart, she said, her voice breaking. The doctor said any shock could. Martha, there's nothing wrong with my heart. I had my gallbladder removed last year, remember? The doctor never said anything about stress or heart attacks. She stared at me, confusion replacing the fear in her eyes. But I thought. I was so sure. You were so scared of leaving me that you convinced yourself I couldn't handle the truth, I said. But Martha, we promised each other, in sickness and in health. This is the in sickness part, and I'm not going anywhere. Martha broke down completely then, sobbing against my shoulder while I held her and let her cry. Tommy quietly left the room, giving us privacy for this moment we should have had months ago. When her tears finally subsided, Martha pulled back to look at me. I'm so sorry, Harold. I'm so sorry for lying to you, for shutting you out. I was just so scared. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. Martha took a shaky breath. It started with some stomach pain back in August. I thought it was just indigestion, but when it didn't go away, I went to see Dr. Morrison. He ran some tests and found masses in my pancreas and liver. Pancreatic cancer. One of the worst kinds. My heart sank, but I kept my expression steady. He referred me to an oncologist, Dr. Sarah Hendricks. She's been handling my treatment. Martha's voice was getting stronger now, as if telling the truth was giving her courage. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The tumors are too advanced for surgery, so we're trying chemotherapy, but it's not working, I finished. The tumors have grown since I started treatment. Dr. Hendricks thinks I have maybe 4 to 6 months left. 4 to 6 months. Less than half a year with the woman I'd loved for most of my adult life. What about other treatments? I asked. Second opinions. Clinical trials. I've been researching everything, Martha said. That's part of what I've been doing with Tommy. He's been helping me look up treatment centers, experimental therapies, anything that might help. Tommy came back into the room then, carrying 3 cups of coffee. Martha's been incredibly thorough, he said. We've contacted places like MD Anderson, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. But Harold, the cancer is very advanced. So we fight it anyway, I said firmly. We fight it with everything we have, for as long as we have. Martha squeezed my hands. Harold, there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too scared, too ashamed. My stomach clenched again. What is it? Martha looked at Tommy, who nodded encouragingly. She took another deep breath. It's about Sarah, she said quietly. About when she was born. What about Sarah? You were overseas with the military when she was conceived. You came back when she was 3 months old, remember? I nodded. I'd been deployed to Germany for 8 months, from just after Martha's birthday in October until the following June. Sarah had been born in March. The dates never quite added up, Martha continued, her voice barely above a whisper. But you were so happy to have a daughter, and Sarah looked so much like your mother, that no one ever questioned it. A cold dread was settling in my stomach. Martha, what are you saying? There was someone else, she whispered. Just one night, when I was so lonely and scared with you gone. It was Robert Clemens from down the street. His wife had just passed away from pneumonia, and we were both grieving, both lonely. We comforted each other, and one thing led to another. Robert Clemens. I remembered him vaguely, a quiet man who'd lived 3 houses down from us when we were first married. His wife Eleanor had died suddenly that winter, leaving him with 2 young boys to raise alone. You mean Sarah might not be? I couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know for certain, Martha said, tears streaming down her face again. I've wondered all these years, carried this guilt. But Harold, Sarah is your daughter in every way that matters. You raised her, loved her, taught her to ride a bike, walked her down the aisle. Biology doesn't change any of that. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this revelation. Sarah, my youngest daughter, might not be my biological child. The little girl who'd wrapped me around her finger from the moment I held her, who'd crawled into my lap every night for bedtime stories, who'd called me, Daddy, in that sweet voice that melted my heart, she might be another man's daughter. Does she know? I asked. No, Martha said quickly. No one knows except Tommy now, and you. Robert moved away right after you came home from Germany. I never told him about the pregnancy, never contacted him. For all he knows, nothing came of that night. And you've never said anything to Sarah? How could I? She adores you, Harold. You're her hero. And even if Robert is her biological father, you're still her real father. You're the one who was there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every important moment in her life. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. I looked at Tommy, who was watching this conversation with a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. How long have you known about this? She told me last week, he said quietly. She's been wrestling with whether to tell you, especially with the cancer diagnosis. She's afraid that losing both you and her, that Sarah won't be able to handle losing both you and the truth about her parentage at the same time. But Martha, I said, why tell me this now? Why not take this secret to your grave? Martha wiped her eyes with a tissue Tommy handed her. Because I'm dying, Harold. And I can't die with this lie between us. I've been carrying this guilt for 35 years, wondering if you ever suspected, wondering if Sarah ever would. I needed to tell someone, and with the cancer. I needed to clear my conscience. I was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything I'd learned in the past few minutes. My wife was dying. My youngest daughter might not be my biological child. Everything I thought I knew about my family was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. But as I sat there, looking at Martha's tear-stained face, I realized something important. None of it changed how much I loved them. Cancer couldn't change 47 years of marriage. And Sarah would always be my daughter, no matter whose DNA she carried. Martha, I said finally, I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No more lies, no matter how well-intentioned. If we're going to fight this cancer together, we do it with complete honesty. Can you promise me that? Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I promise. Good. I stood up and helped her to her feet. Now let's go home and figure out how to tell our daughters that their mother is sick. As we walked toward the door, Tommy called out to us. Harold. Martha. There's one more thing. We turned back to him, and I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. What is it, Tommy? The night Martha told me about Sarah's parentage, she also told me something else. Something about your other daughters that she's been keeping secret too. Martha went pale again. Tommy, please. What about our other daughters? I demanded. Tommy looked at Martha, then back at me. Maybe Martha should be the one to tell you. I turned to my wife, seeing the fear and shame written all over her face. Martha, what else haven't you told me? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to speak again. It's about Rebecca and Elizabeth, she said quietly, referring to our two older daughters. About things that happened years ago that I helped them hide from you. My heart was pounding again. What things? Rebecca's first marriage, Martha said, her voice barely audible. The one that lasted only 6 months when she was 19. She told you it ended because they were too young, that they just grew apart. I nodded. I remembered that brief marriage to that boy, what was his name? David something. Rebecca had been heartbroken when it ended, but she'd seemed to bounce back quickly enough. The real reason the marriage ended was because David hit her, Harold. He gave her a black eye and bruised her ribs, and when she came to me, I helped her leave him. But she was so ashamed, so convinced you'd blame her somehow, that she made me promise never to tell you the truth. The room seemed to spin around me. He hit her. That son of a... I started to rise from my chair, 40 years of paternal fury coursing through me. Harold, sit down, Martha said gently. It's over. It was over decades ago. Rebecca got counseling, she healed, she found Tom and they've been happy for 20 years. But she was so young then, and so scared you'd think less of her. Think less of her? For being abused by her husband? You have to understand, Harold. This was 1978. People didn't talk about domestic violence the way they do now. Women were often blamed for their husband's behavior. Rebecca was terrified that you'd ask what she did to provoke him. I sank back into my chair, trying to process this. My eldest daughter had been abused by her first husband, and I'd never known. I'd never been able to protect her, to help her, to show that bastard what happens to men who hurt my little girl. What about Elizabeth? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Martha's face crumpled. The miscarriage she had before Jenny was born. She told you it was early, that it just happened naturally. Elizabeth had lost a baby in her second year of marriage to Mark. She'd been about 3 months pregnant, and she and Mark had been devastated. But they'd recovered, and Jenny had been born 2 years later, followed by their son Michael. It wasn't natural, Martha continued. Elizabeth fell down the stairs at work. She was pushed by a coworker who was jealous about a promotion Elizabeth had gotten. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late to save the baby. Pushed. The word came out as a growl. The woman claimed it was an accident, that they'd bumped into each other at the top of the stairs. There were no witnesses, and Elizabeth was too devastated to fight it. She just wanted to grieve and move on. But Harold, losing that baby nearly destroyed her. She blamed herself, wondered if she could have done something different, if she could have avoided the confrontation. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't either of them tell me? Tommy, who'd been sitting quietly through these revelations, spoke up. Because they knew you'd want to fix it, Harold. You'd want to hunt down David and make him pay for hurting Rebecca. You'd want to confront Elizabeth's coworker and demand justice. They were trying to protect you from carrying their pain. But I'm their father, I said, my voice breaking. It's my job to carry their pain. It's my job to protect them. They know that, Martha said. But Harold, you can't protect your children from everything. Sometimes they have to fight their own battles, heal their own wounds. And sometimes they just need their mother to hold them while they cry. I understood then why Martha had been the keeper of all these secrets. Our daughters had come to her when they were hurting because they knew she would listen without judgment, support them without trying to take over their lives. I would have wanted to charge in like a bull, demanding justice, seeking revenge. Martha had given them what they actually needed, a safe place to fall apart and put themselves back together. Is there anything else? I asked, though I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. Martha and Tommy exchanged a look. "There's one more thing," Martha said hesitantly. "About Sarah's wedding." Sarah's wedding to Tommy had been 5 years ago, a beautiful ceremony at the old church downtown, followed by a reception at the country club. It had been one of the happiest days of my life, watching my youngest daughter marry a man who clearly adored her. What about the wedding? The night before the ceremony, Sarah came to me in a panic. She'd found some letters that Tommy's first wife had written to him before she died, talking about how much she loved him, how she hoped he'd find happiness again someday. I looked at Tommy, who was staring at his hands. Sarah was convinced that Tommy was still in love with his first wife, that he was only marrying her because he was lonely. She wanted to call off the wedding. "But she didn't call it off," I said. "No, because I talked to Tommy that night, and he explained that while he would always love his first wife, his love for Sarah was different, not better or worse, just different. He loved Sarah for who she was, not as a replacement for someone else." Tommy looked up then. "I should have thrown those letters away years ago. I kept them because I thought I owed it to her memory." But Martha helped me understand that keeping them was hurting Sarah, making her feel like she was competing with a ghost. "We burned the letters together that night," Martha said. "Sarah, Tommy, and me." And then Sarah walked down the aisle the next day with complete confidence in Tommy's love for her. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. Decades of family secrets, pain, and healing that I'd known nothing about. My daughters had faced abuse, loss, and doubt, and they'd turned to their mother for comfort and guidance. Martha had carried all of their burdens, helped them through their darkest moments, and never once complained about the weight of it all. "Martha," I said finally, "why are you telling me all of this now?" "Because I'm dying, Harold," she said simply. "And I can't take these secrets with me. The girls don't know I'm sick yet, and when they find out, they're going to need you more than ever. They're going to need to know that they can come to you with anything, just like they came to me. But what if they blame me for not being there for them before?" "They won't," Martha said with certainty. "They love you, Harold. They've always loved you. They just needed different things from each of us. You were their hero, their protector, the one who made them feel safe. I was their confidant, their soft place to land. Together, we gave them everything they needed." I reached across the table and took Martha's hands in mine. They were thinner than they used to be, more fragile, but they were still the hands that had held our babies, comforted our children, and loved me for 47 years. "No more secrets," I said. "Promise me, Martha. Whatever time we have left, we face it together, honestly." "I promise," she said. "But Harold, there's something you need to know about telling the girls. About how we handle this." "What do you mean?" "I want to tell them together, all 3 of them at the same time. I don't want them to have to carry this alone, even for a few days. And I want to tell them here, at Tommy's house, so he can be there to support Sarah." I understood. Martha was still thinking about everyone else, still trying to make this as easy as possible for our daughters. "When?" I asked. "This weekend. Sunday dinner. I'll call them and ask them to come here instead of our house. I'll make up some excuse about wanting to see Tommy's new renovations or something." Tommy nodded. "Sarah's been wanting to have everyone over anyway. She won't think it's strange." "What about the other secrets?" I asked. "About Rebecca's first marriage, Elizabeth's miscarriage, Sarah's wedding doubts. Those stay between us," Martha said firmly. "Those are their stories to tell, if and when they choose to. My job was to keep their secrets, not to expose them." I couldn't listen anymore. Not to the planning, not to the careful orchestration of how to break our daughters' hearts. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely function, but I knew I had to face this head-on. I stood up abruptly. "I need some air," I said. I walked outside and stood on Tommy's front porch, gulping in the cold November air. The leaves on the oak tree in his front yard were gold and red, beautiful in the afternoon light. Soon they'd fall, and the tree would stand bare through the winter. But come spring, new leaves would grow. Life would continue. Martha followed me outside. "Harold? Are you okay?" I turned to look at her, really look at her. This woman who'd been my partner for nearly half a century, who'd borne my children and kept my family together, who was now facing death with the same quiet strength she'd shown through every challenge in our life together. "I love you," I said. "I love you more than I have words to express. And I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" "For not being the kind of husband and father that our daughters could come to with their problems. For making you carry all of this alone. For being so wrapped up in my own fears and insecurities that I didn't see how much pain you were in." Martha stepped closer and put her hands on my chest. "Harold, you were exactly the husband and father we needed. You worked hard to provide for us. You taught our girls to be strong and independent. You showed them what a good man looks like, so they'd know what to look for in their own husbands. Don't you dare apologize for being who you are. But I should have known. I should have seen. You can't protect people from life, Harold. You can't spare them from pain or heartbreak or difficult choices. All you can do is love them and be there when they need you. And you did that. You've always done that." I pulled her into my arms then, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. She felt smaller than she used to, more fragile, and I knew I was already starting to lose her. "We need to go back inside," she said after a few minutes. "We need to plan for Sunday." "Martha, wait." I held her back for a moment. "The secret about Sarah's paternity. Do you really think we should tell her?" Martha was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she said finally. "I've been wrestling with that question for months. On one hand, she has a right to know. On the other hand, it might destroy her relationship with you, and that would destroy me." "It wouldn't destroy our relationship," I said with certainty. "Sarah is my daughter. She's been my daughter for 35 years, and no DNA test is going to change that. But what if she wants to find Robert? What if she wants to know her biological father? Then we'll help her do that, if that's what she wants. But Martha, I need you to understand something. Even if Robert Clemens is Sarah's biological father, I don't regret a single day of raising her as my own. She brought me nothing but joy." Martha started crying again, but these were different tears, tears of relief, maybe, or gratitude. "I love you, Harold Miller," she said. "I love you so much it hurts. I love you too, Martha Miller. And we're going to get through this together." We went back inside then, and spent the next hour planning how to tell our daughters that their mother was dying. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had, but also one of the most important. Because for the first time in months, Martha wasn't carrying this burden alone. Tommy called Sarah and asked her to organize a family dinner for Sunday. He made it sound casual, like he just wanted to show off some work he'd been doing on the house. Sarah was delighted, she'd been trying to get the whole family together for weeks. As we prepared to leave, Tommy pulled me aside. "Harold, I want you to know that helping Martha these past few months, it's been an honor. She's an incredible woman." "Yes, she is," I agreed. "And Tommy? Thank you. For being there for her when I couldn't. For keeping her secrets when she needed someone to trust. You're a good man." That Sunday couldn't come fast enough, and yet I dreaded it with every fiber of my being. How do you tell your children that their mother is dying? How do you find the words to break their hearts while still giving them hope? But Martha had been right about one thing: we needed to face this together, as a family. No more secrets. No more lies. Whatever time we had left, we would spend it honestly, loving each other through the beautiful and the ugly, the hope and the despair. Sunday afternoon arrived gray and cold, with the promise of winter in the air. Rebecca arrived first with her husband Tom, followed by Elizabeth and her family. Sarah was already there, of course, bustling around Tommy's kitchen like she owned it, making sure everyone had enough to eat. When we were all gathered in Tommy's living room, Martha took my hand and stood up. "I asked you all here today because I have something important to tell you," she began, her voice steady despite the tears already forming in her eyes. And then, with our whole family surrounding us, Martha Miller began to tell our daughters that she was dying. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.